Well, thank you, everyone, and thanks to Denise and Cynthia, Suad, and Dan for being the presenters this evening. I'm Carolyn Jacobs with GBH Education Department. We are recording this session. We'll send out the link to the recording along with links for many other things in the follow-up email that comes out to you tomorrow. We have compiled a very robust list of resource links. Everything that you see tonight is on this document along with much more. And you'll have the link to that resource document in the chat, and that's also in the follow-up email we'll be sending out tomorrow. We're using Zoom Webinar as our platform, and that means that the microphone and the camera are reserved for just the presenters. I want to thank Denise Olson, Director of Marketing and GBH Education. She's in the chat. She'll be busy posting links, fielding your questions, and passing questions along to the presenters as needed. We will try to get to as many questions during the presentation. We have reserved some time at the end. We are officially ending at 8:15. And we'll have a few minutes after the presentations to respond to the questions. Many of you submitted questions ahead of time as part of your registration, and there were a couple of themes. One of them was support for EL students, and our presenters have a lot of experience with that, so they might be in the chat helping you out with some tips for working with EL students. We also had a couple of questions from people from individual states, Alaska and California, I remember in particular, asking if there were resources, if the resources were available for them. And let me make a blanket statement that everybody, the resources you're going to see tonight are available to everyone, no matter where you live. GBH is Boston's public media station and the producer of many iconic series that you see on your public media station in your local area. And you might recognize some of the names that you see right here. I hope you do. In the education department, we've been producing materials for pre-K to 12 education in and out of the classroom for over 40 years. And everything we do is available at no cost, so free and available everywhere. Along with PBS, GBH co-founded and now co-manages the platform PBS LearningMedia, which is where you will find many of the resources you're going to see this evening, plus thousands more. I hope this site is familiar to you already. If it's not, please check it out, pbslearningmedia.org. There are resources for pre-K to 12 across the curriculum, things like short clips, interactive lessons, lesson plans, documents, audio files, interactive activities, games, etc. And the site is friendly, user-friendly, and you're able to search and save and share. You are welcome to explore the site without signing in, but we encourage you to sign in and set up an account, free of course, because then you can make full use of the site. You can download resources, save things to folders, etc. So now I want to introduce the presenters. This is often my favorite part of a webinar. Dan is a principal in residence and the science lead at the UP Education Network in Massachusetts. He is a former middle school science teacher. He is the recipient of the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. The acronym for that is PAEMST. And if you're not familiar with that, I'm assuming all of you are probably science teachers, please check it out. It's a wonderful organization, and it's an honor to be a part of that. And that was in 2020 that Dan was the representative from Massachusetts. And then in 2017, he was the he won the Milken Educator Award. Currently, Dan is serving his second term as a GBH Educator Ambassador, and we've had the pleasure of collaborating with him on many projects over the recent years. All four of these presenters are educator ambassadors with GBH. This is a program that has a 2-year term. They're part of a cohort of about 20 educators, and we work very closely with them, and we're very appreciative of the time that they put in and their input that they give us. This webinar was totally conceived of and organized by the presenters, by the educator ambassadors. Next, we have Suad. Suad is a seasoned educator who has taught in multiple states and Egypt and Morocco, which is her home country. In 2015, she was nominated for the Global Teacher Prize, established by the Varkey Foundation. And if you're not familiar with that organization, that's another organization to check out. And I imagine Suad might put something in the chat about that. In addition to her master's in education and technology, she's earned a certificate for math specialist, advanced TESOL, and CAG certificate in curriculum and instruction. And this is Suad's first time presenting on a GBH webinar. So thank you, Suad. Denise Cooper works very hard to create a safe space for all her students who attend school only virtually, dealing with a variety of challenges that keep them from in-person education. She recently completed her master's degree in information technology. She enthusiastically shares PBS LearningMedia resources with her colleagues. Her inspiration comes from watching PBS program during her childhood, and she hasn't stopped. If you have any questions about children's programming in particular, Denise Cooper on this call is your gal. She is a huge fan of Molly Denali and many others, and she just exudes enthusiasm about the children's programming. And in her role, she is an interventionist, an intervention teacher, interventionist educator, and she covers multiple grades in the elementary. Anyway, that's it for, and Denise this is a second time that she's presented with us on a webinar. Cynthia Grusso teaches 7th and 8th grade mathematics in Massachusetts. She teaches in a looping model. So she has 7th graders, and then the following year she has 8th graders, and her team was instrumental in conceiving of the looping model and running it, and it's been very successful. She's also the math department head and curriculum leader, and in addition to her master's in mathematics, she earned a CAG certificate in educational leadership. She participates in many, many district and statewide committees, and this is her second webinar for GBH. Welcome all. All right, the objective for the webinar tonight is on the screen. Our plan is to explore ideas to help students see the connection between science in and outside of class and possibilities for student impact in their communities. And we'll be drawing heavily on free resources available on PBS LearningMedia. So I'm going to be turning the mic very soon over to Suad and Cynthia. Suad is going to kick things off with a lesson she developed around honeybees, focusing on a guest speaker she invited into her class via Zoom, and a couple of resources from PBS LearningMedia. And one of them is an interactive lesson. And if you're not familiar with interactive lessons, we're going to encourage you to check those out. You'll have the link to Suad's interactive lesson in the chat, and there are hundreds more on the site. Let's see, and following Suad will be Cynthia, and she is a former beekeeper. And remember, she's a math teacher, and she has many more resources related to the topic of bees to share with you. And she also has some little tips about using the site. Then Denise. Remember, Denise covers multiple grades as an intervention specialist, and she's going to show a few examples of how she makes STEM connections to the outside world across the elementary grades. Dan worked with a middle school health teacher in the Up Education Network, and he filmed an interview with her of how she used grade-appropriate resources from NOVA's program, The Cannabis Question. These resources are also on PBS Learning Media. Dan will also talk a bit about teaching diabetes in middle school, using resources from a broadcast that was on PBS a couple of years ago called Blood Sugar Rising. All right. I am going to turn things over to Suad. Thanks again for joining us, and I'll be back on at the end for a few remarks. Thank you.
Well, hello. Hi, I'm Suad Belkaid. I teach elementary science at the Fessenden School, which is a private day boarding all-boys school with a large international student body located in the suburban area of Boston. Next. I chose honeybees and beehives for our 4th grade environmental unit. I teach 3 4th grade classes twice a week, 45 minutes each class. This topic was chosen for its relevance to the real world and its potential to inspire action among my students. The unit spanned over a period of 3 weeks, allowing ample time for exploration and engagement. Throughout the unit, the students were captivated by the fascinating world of bees and the crucial role they play in our ecosystem. Using tools like PBS LearningMedia, gizmos, and the beekeeper expert, they learned about the intricate process of honey production. The student also gained a deeper understanding of the importance of these pollinators. While this was not my first time I taught about honeybees and beehives, it was the first time I integrated it into a larger theme of taking real-world action. My goal was to empower students to make a positive impact on the environment and inspire others to do the same. When looking back at the unit, there are a few things I would do differently next time. First, I will give my students more chances to use what they learned in real-life situations, like creating a bee-friendly garden. We do have a garden in our school, or visiting a local bee farm. I have listed here some of the resources I used. I'm going to expand a bit on the guest speaker, Dr. Holly Freeman, and 2 PBS LearningMedia resources: Disappearance of the bees, what's the impact, and we're going to look at an interactive lesson. Next, thank you. We're going to take a look at the interactive lesson I used from PBS LearningMedia. It's part of the collection celebrating Nebraska pollinators. I assigned it to my student on Seesaw. Carolyn will pull up the site, she's actually doing that, and launch the lesson. I particularly like that I can customize the resources I found on PBS LearningMedia to fit my specific curriculum needs and my own teaching style. For example, after finding a video, I can review the related resources section on the PBS LearningMedia page and look for supplementary materials such as lesson plans, worksheets, or interactive activities that accompany the video. As you can see now from what Caroline is pulling up, you have a text and you have also either a picture or audio or a video. My primary goal is student engagement. The interactive and multimedia nature of PBS LearningMedia resources can help engage my student in the learning process. Student can explore scientific concepts through virtual labs, simulations, and game, which can help them to better understand complex concepts and retain information. This interactive lesson is one of the hundreds available on the site. By the way, also, I was going to add that I look for lessons that have hands-on activities because I really strongly believe students learn by doing. Next slide, thank you. A guest speaker was an important component of the lesson. A guest speaker adds excitement to learning by sharing their real-life knowledge. Just this year, I have arranged for several guest speakers from my other units, such as paleontologist, radiologist, chemist, and a NASA expert. For this unit, I invited Dr. Holly Freeman to do a Zoom presentation about bees. I have actually a personal connection with her. She's not only an educator, author, and filmmaker, but also a beekeeper. Moreover, my daughter is featured in 2 of her books with her daughter and another daughter's friend. They all shared the same birthday. And the books tells a true story about 3 friends who grew up in Milton and shared and celebrated the same birthday. What makes their friendship beautiful is that they come actually from different racial and cultural background, highlighting the importance of diversity and inclusion. As you can see in the middle, the girls remained friends to this day, and here are the girls and we the moms with them. Next. And there are some of Holly's publications on bees. I use the Beekeeping Besties with my student, and actually, in fact, here's my copy. And these books have the power to teach, motivate, and create a feeling of wonder and responsibility toward the natural world. Next. And actually, we are going to watch this slide, Dr. Holly Freeman presentation, which was really engaging and informative. This is an excerpt showing how engaged the students, my students, were asking many, many questions.
And the last thing I'm going to say before I answer your question is that this is a sleeping bee. Sometimes you'll find a sleeping bee in a flower. So this bee was totally like, had its fill of pollen and nectar and was just kind of chilling in the flower. And I managed to catch a picture. So I'll leave you with the sleeping bee.
He fell asleep at work.
He fell asleep at work. He took a little nap. It's a she, because all the foragers are women, are girls. So she took a nap. So I'm ready to answer y'all's questions.
Oh, we have a lot of questions, Dr.
All right.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, Ben, go ahead.
How do they determine for, how they make the queen cups? How did they determine which egg and if it's a boy or a girl?
Okay, great question. So when the workers make cells that are a little bit larger, those are the cells that the queen is going to lay the drone egg in, the unfertilized egg in, the male egg, and the regular shaped ones is for the workers. And I'm not sure how they determine which egg is going to be the queen. I don't know. I think they just kind of choose one, and sometimes they choose more than one, because the one that emerges first it will sting the other queens inside of her cell. Oh. Yeah. So because you can only have one queen. So if 2 emerge, or one is about to emerge and one's already out, she'll sting the other one inside of her cell.
Wow. Wait, but to kill them, wouldn't the queen who stung the bee die?
Yes, because there's only.
All right. As you can see from the clip, the student had lots of questions. Actually, one student asked about what happens when bees abandon their hive. I looked for a suitable video on PBS Media and discovered one that is appropriate for my 4th grade student. We're going to play a 1-minute excerpt of a 5-minute clip. This is a screenshot on PBS LearningMedia. Farmers in a province in China that grows a lot of pears were worried because there weren't enough bees to pollinate their crops. So the Chinese government made a surprising decision and told the farmers to pollinate the flowers by hand, which can be a laborious task. This has made farmers in the United States wonder if they will have to do the same thing one day. Let's watch, the clip.
Every spring, hundreds of workers take to the trees and pollinate the pear flowers, blossom by blossom. A hive of bees can pollinate up to 3 million flowers in a single day. A human can only pollinate up to 30 trees. It's a painstaking and expensive substitute for a service that bees once provided for free.
I wish it would go back to the natural state. I wish the bees would come back, because this is a really difficult situation for us.
To replace honeybees with human pollinators in the United States would cost more than $90 billion a year. And even here, in Hanyuan, hand pollination may not be sustainable for long.
For the farmers doing hand pollination, it's still feasible. But now, China is changing very fast. Most of the young people are heading to the city. I think in not such a long time, 10 to 20 years, hand pollination will be very difficult.
All right. Following the clip, we're going to be hearing from Cynthia with some additional resources that support a project on bees and beekeeping. Thank you so much.
Every spring,
Hi there, everybody. My name is Cynthia Grusso. A little background on me. I work at a junior high in seventh and eighth grade. And like Carolyn mentioned, I am a looper, and I also teach adult education in the evening. And I have taught pretty much everything from K to 8, ELA, social studies, science, but mostly math. But I have done that. And I've done a lot of committees about curriculum and testing and teacher testing. So we'll get into showing you some of the resources and how they work for you. When you go into PBS LearningMedia, you are going to be presented with a screen, and on the right side, as you can see, I have those arrows. There's lots of embedded links that will provide you support before you even do a lesson. So there's like a lesson plan. You can print it out. There's a print button for it. It provides you with additional materials. So there, as you see there, there's always support materials to use with students, support materials to use with teachers. So it's very clear what's for you and what's for your students. There are, so like if you click, I clicked into the link and put a picture here of the biology of plants, clicks into a whole nother page. It is like, it can be a rabbit hole because you can get lost. So there's just so much information that you can you're going to pull and pick what you want to share with your students and what is appropriate for your students. It is also, things are put into like also things called collections. So at the top where it says students, it says collection. So when you click into those, it expands into even, you see everything. At the bottom, I pointed out there are essential questions, which are always good to have. So like when you go into something, I always like to look at the essential question because it kind of frames the whole lesson for you. So you can get an idea of where the direction of what those videos and resources are offering you. So like I said, there's embedded resources, and then you go into that resource and there are more hyperlinks also that bring you to other things. So it just goes deeper. And the resources are from different places. So it's not, so this is a PBS material, and inside there, it brings you to something that supports this PBS material. Next slide, please. Here, as you get closer and you look on the left side of the screen, there's ways to share your resources for your students. And it's super easy. I've done it before. I'm like, oh, I like this. And I might upload it and click it, put it into my Google Classroom and not post it, just keep it as a draft because I don't want to forget about it. Because I know it's something I might want to share with my students at a later time, or I know some particular topic is coming up and it's relevant to what we're learning. So I sometimes we'll be in there and I'll be like, click, going into the draft zone, and I will leave it in my Google Classroom and know, like, okay, it's there and I can find it again. So variety, you can favorite it, you can do a social share, you can build a lesson, and then you share it like link, or you can put it in the Google Classroom. You know, you can just get the link and say, here you go. If I don't know if you want to email it to them, but I think many, or whatever your system is that you use for your students. On the left, like I said, you'll be getting some of these resources. These are all different topics about bees. You know, how the colony collapsed, what the buzz about bees, how to create a better beehive, the importance of bees and how they are very much needed in our society, as you can see from the previous video. But all of these support what could be used with what just Suad had talked about. And lots of, there's more, that's just some. That is just some of them, not all of them. So you can spend a lot of time learning about those bees. And I know as a former beekeeper, I know how incredibly amazing a beehive is, but it's also incredibly fragile. You know, it's susceptible to so many things that cause it. You know, I lost my beehive. Yes, not to colony collapse, but I lost it to wax moths, which found their way because they like the honeycomb, and they were eating it. So it was a sad day. But that is all I have to say about the additional resources. And next we're going to turn this over to Denise, who's going to share her love of Molly of Denali and other things.
Thank you, Cynthia. So I work at a K through 12 certificate school. And as I mentioned, you know, as Carolyn mentioned, my goal is always to help students engage more in the world around them and to become citizen scientists through beach cleanups, you know, all types of community involvement that is all around them. That is my big goal every year. This is a resource that I used with the kindergarten class. They are much younger. And in kindergarten, we're focusing on being a home helper, being a community helper. This goes along with, there are short clips. This is a game, but it goes along with a short clip that you can watch of the actual episode where Rosie is helping her little brother and he is getting ready for bed. I used that along with a book we were working on, one of our ELA standards is sequencing. So doing what is first, what happens in the middle of a story, and what happens at the end. So we watched this short clip to help us remember what we were doing in terms of beginning, middle, and end of a story. This game is all about being community helpers because in kindergarten, Massachusetts, the students are learning their name, their address, you know, their phone number, and you know where things are in their community. So riding around with Rosie, Rosie is a community helper, and Rosie has to drop off the recycling and go all around the town helping out in the community, which is a super fun game. I would watch the episode first. I will let you know if you give your students this game, you will lose them for a little while. There's a lot of tasks within the game that they like to do, and it was difficult getting them back from the game, but Rosie is riding all around the community, and I think we're going to watch a clip of that if you can get it to hopefully work. And you can mute the sound on this, and you can mute the voice. This is a great resource because it is available in English and Spanish. I know people had asked about, you know, EL students in different languages. You can offer it in both. And you can see here, they're going to use the little map. It has a little bit of sound to it. And Rosie's going to drop off the recycling. And she drives the little truck around. And then she's going to help out with the flowers that are dying that need watering. So she's helping out all around the community. And again, in this young age, we want students excited about helping out at home, helping out in their classroom. You know, we always have student helpers, they have jobs, and then helping out in the community. She's going to drop off the mail. Made a card for Abuela. She's going to mail that. Abuela lives in Mexico City, so it's also a great time to teach about geography, locations. And here's a little truck. And you can see it's a very cute game for very young students. Learners, even pre-readers, because if they can't read, they can still sort of follow along just using the graphics, which is also great. So that is the Riding Along with Rosie game, which is one that I love. This is Icky's Bedtime. And this is a short one because it's part of a lesson. These are clips. So it's not the full episode. It's just a short part. It's about 6 minutes long. This is a really cute one about following, number one, about following directions, but also doing things in order. Like I mentioned, I tied it with an ELA lesson of beginning, middle, end of a story. And they do things out of order, and Rosie gets Icky ready for bed, but in the wrong order. And they see the chaos that ensues when things aren't done the right way. If he puts his pajamas on first before brushing his teeth, you see what happens, and they see the immediate consequence of what happens from not following the plan. So it's a great way to teach students about following directions and what happens beginning, middle, and end of a story is what I tied it to. And Karen, I'm not sure if we want to watch a quick clip of that. The next part, this is for a little bit older students. This resource is Cyber Chase. And this one, as the students get a bit older, you're moving from home, class, community, wanting them to really be involved in the world around them. So this is one that we used. I used this in 3rd grade and tied it with the Hour of Code. The students were using this resource along with coding the Hour of Code. They were coding an AI robot to sort ocean trash and fish. So this is a resource that we used for that. And again, as Cynthia mentioned, it goes right to Google Classroom, easy to assign, quick to find. And there's other resources about stacking trash, all part of it here. So lots of great resources around this resource. And then the next resource, this one also has a great chart. So when students are sorting, they're thinking about disposing of materials, they can draw pictures. And again, I've adapted this. You can adapt this upgrade levels, downgrade levels. If they can't read, they can draw pictures. What do students throw away? What do they reuse? And then what can we recycle? Very important for them to realize what can we do in terms of recycling. This is also a great project to do with older students towards Earth Day, as they get more involved in World Oceans Day and realizing how our actions impact our community. This is one of my favorite resources, I have to say. So when you have students, if you have some reluctant readers or students that say, well, I like your project, but it's not really what I'm interested in, this is a great search project. It is a massive list that's compiled by the Sci Girls. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sci Girls. It's a great project here. It is citizen science, and you can pick an activity, you can pick a topic, and you will find hundreds of resources. Say the student wants to learn about, let's see, nature and outdoors. Yeah, we'll go with that one. Nature and outdoors, and they want to learn about helping animals or helping with the ocean. You pick an activity, pick a topic, you can put in a keyword, and then you can search. When you click the search button, it pulls up a massive list of other links, other websites that you can go to. Pretty much every student can find something they would like to do and be involved in. So you can group your students. This is a great time to differentiate and group your students according to interest. What would you like to work on? How would you like to help your community? How would you like to help the world? They can pick an activity, pick a topic, and you can spiral off of that. And then here also is another set. These are videos, because one of the reasons that sparked really my passion for this was a student, thinking about what can students do. And then it's important for students to see other students being active in their community, being citizen scientists. So here, these are student-led projects. And as the students are thinking about what kind of projects they would like to do, they can see other students. It goes through all the parts of a project, the research, the data collection, the brainstorming, sharing, the actual project, what happens after, more data collection, going back to experiment. All the parts of project are here, and it displays students doing those parts of the project. So students can see themselves, that mirror of another student doing a project, not just a teacher-led project, which is great. And yes, it also shows the role models. So it does show the teacher part. These are the role models that are helping along with the project, so they can see what kind of careers could I do? Could this be a career? Maybe this is something I want to do long term. And they can see people of all diverse backgrounds in different areas of science, which is great. And again, Sci Girls isn't just for girls, it's for everyone, all genders. So, and this one, and now this upcoming project is one we're working on for 5th grade. This one came, we started working on animals. And so every Friday, this is Fritz. Fritz is a hippopotamus, baby hippo at the Cincinnati Zoo, who's recently born this year. And I was working with a group of students, and we're working on a PBL project. And the student said, well, what can I do? I'm just a kid. Like, I want to help, but how can I help? I don't even have any money. So I went online to think about conservation and how to bring this to real life for students who don't have money, who don't have resources, may not have any budget for supplies, but we wanted to make sure that everyone could participate. So that student exasperation of saying, well, I'm just a kid, instead of just leaving it at that, we wanted to turn that into action. So the students can participate, and we're encouraging families to take on projects together, and everyone can do something. So we may not have the solution on our own, but everyone can play a part in the action process. And as we all work together, that collective, we're going to get to critical mass as everyone does their part. So they learn that science and conservation is for everyone, regardless of your background, wherever you're from. And the landing spot that we came to was water. That was our water conservation, was the level playing field, that everyone had access to water, whether they were in a home, an apartment, a shelter, anywhere they were, every student had access to water. So we're building the project around water and water conservation. Now in these upper grades, 5th, 6th, middle school, up into high school, the students are starting to realize that what they do, even in their own homes, has a global impact. So we're going from just home, class, and community in the younger grades to home, class, community, worldwide impact. And they're starting to realize that what I do in my little house has an impact on the world. And so that became our focus. This is a great resource about water conservation, bringing this project-based lesson to life for the students. And we'll go through a bit of the lesson quickly. I know I'm running out of time. And so here is a great resource that I found. We were also working on the water cycle, saltwater, freshwater in this grade, and thinking about how important the water was all across the world. So you can see it goes by the grade level. It has the lesson overview, materials before the lesson. I mean, everything is here for you, and it is free. So instead of searching on other sites like I was doing, I was like, oh, it's right here, and it's phenomenal. Everything you need is right here. The handouts are here. All the material is here. And again, all state aligned to the standards. And then it also has support materials. So there's a water use worksheet, which we're going to look at. And the water use worksheet was great because you could sort of plan it out. You could put it with different families. Here's saltwater, freshwater distribution among the earth. It also goes to a water treatment plant and has a video of that. So if you don't, I know someone asked in the chat about guest speakers. If you don't have time to book a guest speaker, do a virtual field trip right here to the water treatment plant. And this one is the water conservation worksheet. So here you can see water flushing, using the showering, bathing, brushing teeth, washing dishes by hand. And the students start to quickly realize how these numbers add very, very fast. They stack. So you're seeing gallons and gallons and gallons day after day after day. And the students are realizing how in America we have access to this clean water. In other parts of the world, they do not. So our overuse of clean water impacts that worldwide use of water, or lack thereof, for humans and for animals. And this one, again, is another great resource as the students are older. Saltwater, freshwater distribution on Earth. It has another part to it here where you can see that the oceans, it's salt water. So it's 90% of the water on Earth is unusable. It's salt water. It's not drinkable. So the students are realizing, whoa, the water that we have is just that small 3%. So they're starting to quickly understand, well, we have to do something here. This can't continue. Our water usage can't continue at the rate we are going. So some of the resource benefits, this is a great universal design and learning project, easily adaptable for wherever you are in the world. Financial equity, no one needed money for this. You just needed access to the worksheet. It can be done digitally. They don't even have to print it. The great thing about this is all students can participate and get their families involved. And the other great thing I thought that I loved about this was every student will have a different result for their family, for their context. So everyone has something to share during presentation time. And then this one is also another part that you can add to this is collaborating or competing with other grades. You can say, our class is going to challenge your grade. If you have, 5th grade buddies that come down to kindergarten, this is a great buddy project. Project idea, field trip ideas, going to an endangered river or lake in your area. On the North Shore, there's the Ipswich River from Burlington all the way up, which is a great project. The Ipswich River watershed, global connection, again, connect with a class from around the world, see what they're doing with their water collection, with their water usage, and also a teacher water challenge. So challenge the teachers, in the staff room. How much water are you using? Is the water running? How much are you using for coffee? So yeah, and you're right. It is tough because water is taught as a renewable resource. Exactly. And this really shows them it is not. So we really have to protect the water that we have. And I now will turn it over to Dan.
Thanks, Denise. So like Carolyn mentioned at the outset, I am a principal in residence at Up Education Network. I have a bunch of responsibilities, but my main ones include curricular design and also instructional coaching of various teachers. One of the teachers I've had the pleasure of coaching over the last 2 years is Casey Halley. Casey is a PE and health teacher, that's her in the bottom right, from Up Academy Boston, which is in South Boston, Massachusetts. And I asked Casey just to share a little bit of what drives her. And she shared that her passion is teaching kids about health topics and skills that they can use for the rest of their lives in all of the dimensions of health. Next slide, please. Casey is really committed to making sure her health class is representative of our students' actual lives and that it's relevant to what they do in school and out of school. And that drove her when it came time to teach about drugs and drug use to the cannabis question. Like Carolyn mentioned, this is a NOVA program. And one of the exciting things when you look it up on PBS LearningMedia, next slide, please, is you can see that it comes with an entire collection. So there are some video clips and you can see a few of those there. You can see a media gallery, but the two resources that were particularly helpful for Casey and myself as we were planning out her unit and her use of the cannabis questions were the educator guide and the community outreach toolkit. Next slide, please. So for example, in the educator guide, there are an incredible wealth of resources for teachers who want to use this media in their classrooms. So for example, a big passion of Casey's is making sure that when we talk about drug use, we don't stigmatize drug use, but rather we can use language that helps inform students. And for example, there is a table in the educator guide with, instead of saying substance use disorder, or rather instead of words like addict or junkie, we can use phrases like substance use disorder. Similarly, there are frequently asked questions that Casey was able to use to strengthen her lesson plans with her students, and those all come from the resource guide itself. Next slide, please. The community outreach toolkit is also an extremely helpful resource. It includes things like ways to extend using the media with a virtual field trip, ways to host a clip screening, and then also even has a guide for how you can host a screening at your school or in your community with a really helpful checklist of how you might implement that in your school and in your community. Next slide, please. Ultimately, what Casey was able to do was use these resources in the collection of PBS LearningMedia as a springboard to planning a really exciting project on interrogating cannabis policy at her school, Up Academy Boston, and actually all of Boston Public Schools. And with that, I'll actually show a clip of my interview with Casey where she can explain it from there. What led you to use the cannabis question as part of your course?
I was looking for like educational materials that were accessible at the middle school level that were also challenging. It was definitely a very big mix of like anything on YouTube was either far too advanced or far in the other direction of like dedicated for like elementary school students, and was honestly, if you teach 8th graders, they'll tell you most of the stuff they watch is kind of corny. So Cannabis Question was definitely a good happy medium of stuff that was interesting and informative and kind of held the expectation bar high while still keeping the content in a way that every single person in the room could understand.
How did you build off using the Cannabis Question in your classroom to ask students to consider the content in their real world lives?
So I say this every day in health class, no matter what. I am never going to tell the kids what to do because I can't control what they do. But I will tell them that I'm giving them information that is relevant to their daily lives. Every decision that they make is filed into what we do in health class. We also do a lot of skills-based work in health class that the Cannabis Question helped a lot. So we talked about analyzing risk and assessing risk for making decisions. The Cannabis Question helped us look at the risks to teens' brains, their academic life, and the legal risks of cannabis use at a young age and in general. Especially the school I work at is 90% Black and brown, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that using cannabis, especially at a younger age, has a higher risk for my students. So, and the Cannabis Question does an excellent job of making those risks clear.
Can you please speak to how you had your students with their performance task wrap up their work on the Cannabis Question?
So after we were done going through the videos and talking about them, we took a look at our schools and our district's drug use policy. We talked a lot about what the difference is between rehabilitation and punishment, and what no tolerance really truly means. Talk a lot about how zero tolerance for something like that doesn't actually fix the problems of addiction. So we took a look at our school's drug policy and our district's drug policy, and I had our students write a letter to the district of ways that they thought that they could amend the school's drug policy, analyzing it, picking it apart, talking about this part's good, this part's bad, this is what we can do to help and make it more comprehensive and also compassionate.
How did it feel to see students apply their knowledge to the real world?
I mean, fantastic. That's why I'm doing this, right? I don't do this because I am crazy about learning about all of the little intricate details of health. I'm doing this because I want my students to be healthy-ish, to take a situation that we learn about and to make at least one better choice in that situation. It's unrealistic for me to tell them that you should be the healthiest people in this world. No one is. I'm not. Whoever's in this webinar isn't. No one I know is the healthiest person in the world. But it is reasonable for them to take a look at the situations that they're handed and the choices that they've been given and trying to make one step above in terms of health what they've been making before, using the information that they've learned in my class. And I think the Cannabis Question gets them much closer to that ideal of being health in a holistic way, being healthy in a holistic way.
Next slide, please.
What led you to use?
So let me review some of what Casey spoke to in that project. She wanted to use the Cannabis Question because it provided that balance of really challenging real world material, but was also really accessible for her 8th graders. It was able to help young adults accurately analyze the risks of cannabis use. I know I spoke about this in the educator guide, but it was really appealing to Casey and to myself that it doesn't stigmatize drug use, but instead it really supports young adults in accurately analyzing the risks. It discusses a range of topics relevant to young adults, including rehabilitation, punishment, no tolerance drug policies, all things that our students in Boston Public Schools are exposed to. And specifically, Casey was able to launch off some of those topics named in the Cannabis Question to examine Up Academy Boston and Boston Public Schools drug policies. And students were able to write letters to BPS on how they might amend and change the drug policy to make it more compassionate, less stigmatizing when it comes to cannabis use. And I just had to pull out this quote from Casey's interview. When I asked Casey what was so powerful, how was it like to see students apply their knowledge to a real world task? She said, I want my students to be healthy-ish, to take a student that we learn about and make at least one better choice in that situation. And it was really exciting to see her students take their knowledge that they learned and think about how can I apply this in my own life and feel empowered to speak on this new topic and speak in a way that's relevant to me and my situation. Next slide, please. This is something that's really relevant, especially in Massachusetts, but if you've never heard of this concept of deeper learning, it's worth a look. This is work that comes from Jalmeda out of Harvard, and it's something that in Massachusetts, the state is really running with. It's this idea that when we instruct, we shouldn't just be thinking about student mastery of grade level work, but also thinking about work across other dimensions, like our students' identities, and also putting them in the driver's seat and letting them be creative and producers. And one of the things that was really exciting about Casey's project is she was able to use the PBS LearningMedia in a way that ultimately let her students check off each of those boxes. Not only did they master content around cannabis and Boston public schools and like the real world implications of drug use and substance use, but also they were creative. They got to write their own letters that like and speak specifically to Boston public schools officials about what they thought wasn't quite fair about the drug policy, and also spoke to their identity as middle school students and students who, you know, are exposed to this kind of media and this kind of thinking and have a voice and want to use it around what they think is fair and what's not. Next slide, please. Carolyn mentioned that this is far from the only piece of PBS LearningMedia that Casey is using right now. After her initial success using the cannabis question, this year, her second year teaching health class, she decided to use blood sugar rising. Like Carolyn mentioned, this is another piece of media you can find on PBS LearningMedia that speaks to the rising epidemic of diabetes in our country. And again, Casey spoke to the fact that she teaches in Boston. The majority of the students at Up Academy Boston are students of color, and this rising epidemic of diabetes disproportionately affects urban communities and communities of color. So what Casey is doing now is really exciting because she is showing her students this new piece of media from PBS LearningMedia, and then asking them to do a different project, making recommendations to their family on how they might consider the foods they eat at home, especially around like some major cultural traditions, in a way that's really thoughtful about the dangers of diabetes. Next slide, please. And just like we talked about with the cannabis question, there are so many resources in the collection. If you look up, and either myself or Denise can put this in the chat in a little bit, blood sugar rising, you find lesson plans, an interactive lesson, you find videos. There are so many resources here that you can use either as is or like Casey did as the foundation of a real world project like Casey is planning to do over the rest of the school year. Next slide, please. So to conclude, thank you, Denise, for putting that in the chat if you want to take a look at that collection. I hope you've realized over the course of this evening, there is an incredible wealth of resources on PBS LearningMedia that not only inform your students, but that can provide a launching off point to allow your students to address real world issues. Start with those collections, both are in the chat. Beyond the clips, there are useful guides, resources, things especially written for educators to implement this media in your classrooms. And also, like Casey did, consider your local context. Craft projects relevant to your students and your community. And I just want to make one more plug for this concept of deeper learning that really drove Casey's work, which is when can we use the media not only to allow students to master content, but also do work really relevant to who they are and where they live and their aspirations, and put them in that seat of getting to be creators and produce work, not just take it in. And with that, next slide, I am going to give it back to Carolyn for some final remarks.
And thank you, Dan, and thank you, everyone. Wonderful job. And Dan mentioned collections, and if you recall with Suad, she was showing you an interactive lesson. When you go on PBS LearningMedia, it's very easy to search the site by the type of media you are looking for, or by the type of resource you're looking for. So I'm not live on the site right here, but when you go in, if you went into science, for example, here in the subjects, you then can choose, are you looking for a collection? Are you looking for an interactive lesson? Are you looking for videos? What are you looking for? And that's a good way of fine-tuning your search. And I agree with Dan that a good way to start if you're a newbie on the site is by searching collections, because that gives you one URL, one page with many resources on it. All right, I just want to give you a few other collections that are on PBS Learning Media to kind of widen your awareness of what is there. Again, there are thousands. The cannabis question is part of the NOVA collection, and there are hundreds of resources in the NOVA collection, full-length NOVA programs that we have taken short clips from when it's appropriate and aligns to a standard, and then coupled that with support materials. And then Sci Girls, the collection, and there will be a link to that Sci Girls design project website, and that's also in the resource document that you'll have. This was what Denise was talking about. No one referenced this, but I wanted to throw it in. The Secret Life of Scientists and Engineers. That's a NOVA project, and there are wonderful profiles of people who have interesting STEM related careers for kids to see themselves in a different role. Sci Girls has the same type of career videos, but they're for a younger audience. And then here are some other collections that relate to the topic tonight that you could draw on. These are the banners of the collection page on PBS Learning Media, and you'll have links to all of these. Just a little range of them. I wanted to give a shout out to a very special collection called Bringing the Universe to America's Classrooms. This is on PBS Learning Media. It has resources for K to 12 around Earth and space science topics. Topics like water, weather, climate, the solar system, the history of the Earth, etc. This was a 5-year project, collaboration between NASA and GBH, and we are very proud of this collection and encourage you to explore it. All right, these are the links for tonight that you will also have in the resource document, and Denise has probably put them in the chat. We do share the slide deck, the resource document, and the post-webinar survey. We listen very carefully to your feedback. After you take a brief survey, you are welcome to download a certificate of attendance for the webinar to give yourself credit. And there's also not in the survey, we ask you for suggestions of other topics. Or if you want to be identified as someone who would like to be a presenter, get in touch with us. So please take the survey. And then I want to thank all the presenters and all of you. I'm going to stop sharing and come back and ask everyone to come back on camera. This is my email, Carolyn_Jacobs at WGBH, at GB. Oh, isn't that interesting? I put WGBH on the screen. We are now known as gbh.org, but my email is wgbh.org.